Hello, hello. There you go. All right. Ooh, okay. Welcome back. Reading week. That went really fast, didn't it? See, when we talk about the time, sense of time is not linear. The time doesn't move or doesn't feel like it's moving in a constant speed. It is true. Reading week goes like, and then semester goes like, oh, but that's okay. We're going to get through this. Any highlights from reading week? Bless you. It could be anything. It could be anything normal.
Saturday,
That comes.
a freestyle like cipher competition.
Cipher competition.
Yeah.
Dance.
Yeah. So I got second.
You get second prize. Ooh, congratulations.
I've never done one of that before.
First time, second prize. Really great. All right. Any other highlights from reading week? What's that? Bears hockey playoff. Did we win? Awesome. Final. That's a Western Conference, right? Western. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's great. I know the wrestling team won the Western. Canada's got a national. Whoa. And curling. Bears curling with national championship too. Great year for the athletics. Really. They're going, they're all in after pandemic probably. For one thing, I made a promise that I'm going to clear some moderately difficult contents in my game, and I did. I sit there and spend 3 hours, 2 nights, well, 3 hours total. And my wife is like, what are you doing? Just like, just so quiet, because I talk typically on a Discord with my friends, but that time not talking. So she was like, what are you doing? Like, honey, I promised this to my students. I have to do this. So that was, I may or may not have used you guys as an excuse, but that was a good time. I cleared. It was great. No salt from no team member. Salt. People being like salty. Yes. It was really nice. Anyway, so quickly, I wanted to go over critical chapters reflection, especially the feedback based off of some of the things I realized based off of your first submissions. So I wanted to go over that. So you already have the resources as to instruction, sample, and rubrics. So those are the basics. If you haven't gone through it, please go through. But this is just extra things based off the patterns I noticed in a critical chapter reflection 1. Okay, so hopefully this will be helpful. Just a few heads up. The reminders, please use Word. I know for some of you, a little difficult, so we'll figure out. Free version of Word is available out of U of A. If you don't know this, if you want to get this because you paid for it, you email me. I'll give you the link, and you can download, actually. Not just the Word, but also the entire Office 360. You can download it for free. And also use the template, please, so that I know where to look for. And that's connected with their sample or something like that. Now, please use the right file name. And this was not in the instruction, so it's fair enough. Some of us didn't get it. And those of you who submitted earlier, obviously you didn't know that. That's totally fine. But something we later discussed. So this is the file name. Your first name, your beautiful last name, and CCR. Next time is going to be 2, right? And the one after that, you're going to make it CCR 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's no 5. Yes, up until 4. So this one is something that I wanted to highlight. As you can see in both syllabus and guideline, instruction, sorry. CCR, I'm trying to discern your reading of the chapter and reading comprehension, your thoughtful, critical thinking while reading, okay? So that's why at the very beginning, you were actually expected to submit the first one even before we finished chapter 4 in a lecture. Make sense? Because this was originally, from the very beginning, meant to be about reading. Okay, so just so you know, you're going to base your definitions on reading, all that kind of things. You could, so please don't just like cite slide a number, right? Or you started to have like out of 7 key concepts, you have like 4 of them that don't exist in the lecture, textbook, because I added it, right? And I go like, The point is, I don't know whether you read the textbook carefully or not, right? So that's the point. So make sure that you communicate your thoughtful reading by citing a chapter. Now, where can some of the lecture understanding can come in? Well, figuring out which concept is important, right? But they're supposed to be key definition, key concept, right? Some of them are not really key. The chapter could help, right? But basically, you base everything about CCR on your reading of the chapter. Okay, that's a quote from the instruction 2. Give me 7 in this first section. It's about the easiest one. You want to get that right? Give me 7 or more key definition. Okay. If any definitions are not consistent with the textbook, they might not count as good definitions because that's what we're looking for, right? Now, but there's a cheat. I don't want to say cheat code or anything, but I'm asking at least 7. So you can give me 10. If the text chapter is a 40-page, I'm pretty sure there's 10 things you can cite on. And if out of 10, you get the 7 good, you're good. You get the full mark. Okay, I'm not looking at the percentage. Make sense? So the shotgun style works. Okay. Generally, great job at the application, especially in the second section where you have to pick up one concept and you have to apply it in your personal leisure life, or there are some issues and trends in industry potentially. Especially, there are many concrete examples and details in your application, which is great. Now, a little bit of tip here. Once you write it up, reread it, your application paragraph, to ensure that details are clearly linked to the chosen concept. So sometimes when you choose a concept A and you give a bunch of, you're passionate about this story that you have, right? I want to tell this story to Shin, and you just go about the details. But the details aren't really about the concept, or maybe generally around that, like leisure needs or leisure motivation, whatever, but it's not clearly linked. For example, you're thinking that you're talking about flow, but is it really flow? When you're actually, your story is about reading a novel, well, is it flow, or is it more of a transportation and engagement that we learn? You got to make that clear logical connection with your details and concrete examples and stories and whatnot and the concept. Okay, you have to make that connection. And the last section about critical questions. Now that one, I'm asking you to go a little beyond the chapter, what you read, okay? And this is the most difficult part. So if you got like if you didn't get the highest mark on that, I'm thinking about my rubric. You get the feedback, and green thing is where you are. What I'm looking at is one of the two things. How can you go beyond the chapter? One of the two ways. One is to challenge it. Challenging is going against what the chapter said. It's simple, going against one way or another. And when you cannot just say, you know what, I don't just agree. That's not going to be a good, challenge and good critic, probably. Well, I don't agree with this part because of maybe your personal observation, right? Because of recent social phenomena, like whatever happened, or because of another concept that you learn or evidence you learn in a different course or discourse, so on and so forth. Make sense? So logically going against. And then, or you can extend, as in go beyond. Going against, going beyond, they're not the same thing, you see? Going beyond the chapter, going, okay, the chapter said up until here, this concept helped this. But maybe that applies to, for example, other group of people as well, because of these reasons. Well, that's a good way to extend it. Well, chapter didn't say that. You went beyond. Make sense? So are you clearer about what I'm asking in terms of critical question? Okay. This is the tricky part because, each professor means a little different things by critical thinking and critical reading. So this is what I mean, okay? And that's in the guideline too, but I wanted to make that clear again. Once again, good critical reading question isn't typically one sentence Although if your sentence is 5 line long, maybe it is, but typically it's not one sentence. So one of the good way to elaborate how thought-free you're thinking, how critically you're thinking in that question is to try to answer your question. So you pose a question. Well, I'm going to try to answer that. If I were the author, I would answer this way. Make sense? Or you can talk about why you're asking that question. Well, I asked this, whatever the challenge question, you're going against that. And I'm going against this point because I think this is an important point because you're explaining why. And that could be another way to elaborate on, show me a little more critical thinking, thoughtfulness here. Here, finally, unlike the section before, the application, I'm asking you to give me a 1. Because otherwise, I know some of you would give me like 5 stories. I love to read the 5 stories, but you realize I'm marking all of this myself. Yes, I do. So I got to limit my time too here. But critical question, I recognize this is the hardest part in this assignment. So you can give me as many questions as possible, and I'm afraid to say this. But you give me a shot, give me your best shot. You don't have to give me a best shot actually. You can give me like a top 2, top 3 questions if you're not sure, right? And I would count the highest. I would mark everything, and I'm like, okay, this would be the highest, so I will mark based off of this. Make sense? Is that the end? Yeah, that's the end. Let me take some questions. I'll give you 30 seconds to talk to each other just quickly. If any questions or concern, like, you know what, I didn't get this part. You're not alone. Just talk to each other and let me hear. 30 seconds. I'm literally counting. Ready, go. Just want to make sure it's clear before moving on to the next one. You good, Joshua? You all good? Jiao, you good too? You good? All right.
When I try to view responses, nothing happens. And sometimes I'll get a pop-up. Ask me to open it in Office, which I have.
You have Office.
Yes.
Can you actually right click on it? Link, right click, and then say download. No. Can you? What about this plus sign? Does it do anything special? Sorry, the requested file cannot be found. More information about. New tab.
It
Okay.
opens the tab, goes away. So I don't know if the file's corrupted or something, but I can't see it.
All right. You send me a quick email. I will send those files in email. You can get it. How many of you actually could find the feedback files? Actually, how many of you could not download the feedback file? I know Jake couldn't. I might have heard that from somebody else. You too, Harin? You couldn't download the file? Send me an email, please. Okay. Well, that was more than 30 seconds. Gosh, time. So any question, except that's very important things. So if you have not seen any file trouble, downloading issues, not seeing any comments, that's not me being a jerk to you. I have comments. That's the computer screwing us up. So I'll just make sure that I will send your email. Okay. Well, actually, send me email. Just CCR1. That's it. Any questions about CCR? All righty. Awesome. Okay. All right, so let me keep going with the chapter 5 leisure needs so that, well, hopefully we will cover the material that up until chapter 6 for midterm 2, as you can see in the study guide. By the way, study guide 2 or midterm 2 study guide is up already, just so you know. Hopefully you get the message, okay? So if you want to go ahead start to prepare, you can do so. Hope it's up to you. We're talking about basic needs, right? Only few needs that are important to us. Then we moved on to leisure need. In leisure study, we studied more of various different kinds of needs, depending on a different context across different situations, like outdoor recreation, whatnot. And then we talked about another framework called Isohola's model. Then now we're here. The chapter asks this interesting question: are there any needs, psychological needs, that can only be satisfied in leisure? What do you think? What about your life? Are there any needs in your life that are only satisfied in your leisure? Work don't do it. Education don't do it. Family might not do it. Just the leisure. Any example? No? Okay. Well, let's see what these researchers found. These guys, Reed and Manel, they're actually guys. They compared satisfaction of 16 expressed needs. And what we meant expressed need in the last component, you might have forgot, that's fine, is basically they're not basic needs. They're not universal. They're not meant to be universal. Compare that between leisure and work to see if any of those 16 was satisfied only by leisure, in leisure life domain. Now, what they found was not surprising. All 16 were satisfied to an extent in both leisure and work. So no, the answer, straightforward answer to this question is not really. There isn't any need, psychological need, that is so unique to leisure that is not satisfied by anything else. Okay, there's no such a thing as far as we know, and based on this study. However, there are some tendencies that, for example, self-esteem, needs for self-esteem, achievement, they were satisfied more in work than leisure. Make sense? Do you get more self-esteem out of your work, don't you? Maybe not, actually. Leisure does sometimes good job too. I don't want to push that, but push that. Achievement, because work tends to have a very tangible, clear, clearly defined goals. When you get that, you may feel more achievement. Now, in leisure, people tended to feel satisfied social interaction needs and escape need, as in getting away, forgetting about your daily stressor. I don't have to think about midterm 2 while playing the video game. That happens, and that's good. Sometimes it's needed. Now, these guys, Ryan and colleagues, Rich Ryan, one of the really famous social psychologists of the 21st century, they conducted experience sampling method. So it's really day by day, activity by activity data, right? Of the satisfaction of the basic needs. So they switched to basic needs among US employees. What they found was very interesting and a good news for us. They found that actually, well, first of all, both leisure, well, they didn't measure leisure. So they measure something called known work. They categorize this way: work versus known work. So basically, by known work, they included both leisure as well as things like, maintenance activities, things like grocery shopping, washing your face, taking showers, sleeping, all that kind of things, right? They're grouped up in this known work. What they found was that both satisfy the basic needs: autonomy, competence, belonging, or relatedness to a degree. So that's consistent with the previous study to an extent. However, they found that actually known work, where leisure is included, did a better job than work in all of that, actually. Satisfying autonomy, which isn't surprising, but this one, even competence, surprisingly, in their study, and relatedness. And the point here is that because they did not separate, they put the leisure and maintenance together in a known work, such a big category, they may have actually downplayed or underestimated the power of leisure here. Because if you think about it, how many of us goes like, you know what, I don't know, you feel autonomy in a grocery shopping. You know what, I might actually do. That's a bad idea. Autonomy in sleeping, I don't know, maybe. Or competence in the grocery shopping. Actually, my wife kind of does. Anyway, but I think that maybe generally leisure does better job than those things, hopefully, right? My wife has a shopping list. She knows all things about deals at the different shops. So we have the route. We go there, buy these, go there, buy these, anyway. And then there's this person, because we didn't separate, we didn't focus on the leisure. This person, Gordon Walker, professor retired here. He followed up that study with their simple survey, not ESM, to study basic psychological need satisfaction between leisure, black, paid work, gray, among Edmontonians. What he found was that, well, leisure does better job, consistent with the Rich Ryan study, in terms of satisfying autonomy. There's a significant difference between there. In contrast, I mean, unlike the Rich Ryan study, actually work does better job in terms of competence satisfaction. So probably that's more accurate. I would say this is what typically we expect and what we see in the literature. Ryan study, I don't know, what was a weird sample or whatever. Relatedness, there wasn't significant difference between them, between the life domains. Now looking at this yellow part, basically comparing satisfaction of basic need within the leisure, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy was the one that was most satisfied in leisure across people. Okay, so the autonomy seems to be the one that's somewhat, we're not saying it's unique to leisure, but autonomy, as you might suspect, is to an extent characteristic. Makes sense? It's not like 100% this is unique, only satisfied in leisure. We're not saying that. That's not what the data is showing. However, this is quite distinguishing. The level of the autonomy satisfaction in leisure is quite distinguishing leisure from other life domain. And the next part of the chapter, we're talking about two need-ish things that are related to autonomy, because autonomy seems to be quite characteristic of leisure. So let's dive into that. And we are reminded in a chapter, at the very beginning of chapter 5, we learned about new leisure paradigm. We learned that in RLS 100, the 2x2 model. Some of you did, when I asked about, do you remember this model? Some of you do this, and I love that because it's also Ultraman, if you know Ultraman reference, but me, Jeff, sorry. Anyway, so new leisure, one of the factors, 2x2 model, he thought so important, identifying, characterizing the best optimal human experience, the pure leisure, was perceived freedom. So we're talking about that. And by perceived freedom, he meant decision freedom, as in freedom to choose things. So for us to feel perceived freedom, according to this guy, John Newlinger, we have to have more than two options, or two or more options, right? I mean, otherwise, how can we choose? Actually, we're going to get to that. How can we choose when we don't have options? Now, the research, though, or decades of psychological research actually showed that freedom or perceived freedom, perception of freedom, is not a zero-sum game. It's not all or nothing. It's not like you feel freedom or you don't feel freedom. It's a continuum. It exists on a continuum. So from the absolute freedom, free, to absolutely not free, super constrained, typically we exist somewhere in between. And we kind of oscillate, we go back and forth, depending on the situation. Maybe in your work, education, not so much. In leisure, more. But it's all continuum. Hopefully makes sense. And then the chapter asks two interesting questions. So I'm going to go one by one. First being, do people distinguish leisure from non-leisure as a function of perceived freedom? Is satisfaction of perceived freedom is quite characteristic to leisure, so that people say, you know what, that thing that I did, I felt the freedom in it. That was leisure. so that there's connection between the level of the freedom people feel and whether or not people consider that experience activity as a leisure. Definition of leisure. Make sense? Well, let's take a look at that. Actually, there are a few studies. By Dr. C, I mean Csikszentmihalyi, the person who did the flow research. His name is so long, it doesn't even fit in there. So Csikszentmihalyi, sorry. Dr. C works, okay? You just say Dr. C and I know who that is, okay? So Dr. C and Graf study experience sampling method. They track the daily activities and perception of freedom. Now, this is a little bit of caveat here. They measure it as yes or no. Over the past 1 hour, you were doing something. Did you feel freedom? Did you not? Yes or no? Was zero-sum game for them. For 8 days with US employees, multiple times a day. So there's like a bunch of data basically. And they found, well, some gender difference. Interesting. Males rated most activity as more voluntary, as in freely chosen, especially cooking and childcare. Their hypothesis, their explanation was probably the gender norm. And for the like 50th time in this, like in probably many courses you're taking, that because the gender norms do not strongly coerce males to like, you got to do this. This is part of your job, They feel more freedom to choose opt in or not opt in, opt out kind of thing. On the contrary, females felt greater freedom of choice when they were in leisure setting outside of home. Does that make sense? This is done like over 40 years ago, 45 years ago. So the gender norms were more conservative, definitely. Maybe the home was associated with, as much as it's like, family space, but also it was obligation, the space of obligation for more females than probably males. So they felt, freedom, choice of freedom to, like a movie theater, restaurants, so on and so forth. Now, my question to you, did this change over the past 45 years? 45 years later. Let me use one example. I always feel uncomfortable when the male characters in TV shows, movie, or whatever, they say, honey, can I help you? Help the housework, right? Cooking, right? Like, dude, why don't you just do it? What do you mean by help? Like, you see what I'm saying? But then I just say that to my wife and they're like, ooh, no, chill, that's not good. So there's that, I feel that I'm also influenced by the gender norms still too. What do you think? Are we more, hopefully in terms of gender, have we achieved something more equitable? Based off of your observation, your experiences, maybe, your relationship and families and whatnot you've seen. I'm just curious. I wanted to take a few minutes. Just give me a sec. Yes.
I think that there are changes, like that study from 1980.
Yeah, 70 actually.
Or sorry, 1980.
80 published, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what the results would be if they did it today.
Yeah.
Similar study.
Mm.
But I think more and more families like that are made up of, a heterosexual couple, both partners work outside the home. That's like probably most typical now. So that sense of the home being one person's domain, I think to a degree, it still typically falls to women in a heterosexual relationship, but I think more and more that balance is shifting.
Yeah.
My
I hope so.
experience,
I hope
feel
so.
like it's partnership.
I hope so.
with my partner, so.
Okay, I hope so too. So no judgment. And if you're not comfortable, you don't have to raise your hand. Oh, you know what? Let's go to Curtis. I was going to do polling, but Curtis, go ahead. Curtis, go ahead.
I think it just depends on like the dynamic of the couple, because I definitely find like in my situation, I could be feeling like I need to do more of like the home chores, but then if I feel more like like my obligations outside of the home, like school and work and other things, like I
Piling
have
up.
my tasks and she has her tasks. Some days I do more, some days she does more. And it's a little bit more dynamic than it was back in the day, because I feel like when the study is done, a lot of households can be run on one income household.
Yes. Yes.
Now where society you have to have dual income to work.
Yes. That's a tough reality, y'all. Yeah.
There's definitely less like onus put onto one person, and more so it's just who's available for it, and they just kind of fall into that role.
Yeah.
Whoever has the more time and to do more things.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then with the, compared to 1970s, I think we have more services and products available that when both sides get busy, we can potentially outsource things like, parenting is now outsourced, like childcare, right? Skip dish, the dish actually come to you, which is great, I guess. Yeah. Not every day, hopefully, but it's good sometimes. Just take a joke. Just a quick polling. And once again, if you're not comfortable, just don't raise your hand. But if you ever, like the closest relationship you observe, like maybe your parents, if you had a parent, or if you had a past relationship, whatever the latest ones, or anything. Raise your hand if you feel like you're the one who did more than 70% of the chore, generally speaking. Like you're the main, you took care of the most, like cooking, cleaning, laundry, all that kind of things. More than 75%, like ish, 70% ish. Yeah. If you raise your hand, if you feel the opposite, you're like, yeah, probably like definitely less than 50%, maybe 40, 30%. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Me too. Me too. Okay. So for all of us, I think this is one of those issues, a gender issue too, right? Both of us have to be kind of watching out on this issue, and hopefully we go better and better direction. Now, going back to the key question, do people define their leisure based off of how much freedom they experience in that particular experience or activity? Now, let me remind you, well, actually, this graph summarizes that result, and horizontal x-axis, we have different basically activities, right? Leisure, not leisure, bunch of different things. Vertical one, this is very important. This is a percentage of time when participant felt freedom. So let's say I sampled, I don't know, Mervin's experience, right? It's ESM, so I get you have to complete the little short answers like a bunch of times over a week, right? And I got like 100 off of you. That's a lot. Well, let's say 10 of them were work, right? 10 of them were work, and then, so paid work, and then 15%, so 1.5 of them you felt free in them. The rest of it, 85%, you didn't feel free. Make sense? Probably. That's what we mean. That's what this means. Sorry, this way. So it makes sense, right? Work, not free. Maintenance type of activity, cooking, personal cares. This was surprising to me, almost reaching 50%. Personal care, and then also the cooking is over 50%. They felt free. I'm always like, I feel like 80% of the time, like, oh, I have to make this vegetable because I'm okay with the meat, but my wife loves vegetables, so that's what I do. And leisure-wise, yay, very much freedom-based. And they were considered as a leisure as well by the participants. Sports and games, over 90% of the time, was considered to be freely chosen activity by people. So it seems that based off of this study, you would answer probably yes to that question. Yes, people seems to define, there's a relationship between leisure and perception of freedom. Now, we tried that again in 2018, so like 5 years ago, before pandemic, so that's a little bit of caveat. We measure daily activity freedom from 0 to 10, so that's very different. Not like it's zero-sum, yes or no, 0 to 10, and well-being and other things with the Japanese university students like university students like you all, and for 7 days. We use smartphones, so the smartphone just triggered short survey. So this is me and my co-workers. We're just trying to do orientation of how this app works and things like that. But this is what we found. And there's some part consistent and not consistent with the other study, Dr. C's study. So I'm going to highlight that. Anyway, the horizontally, it's saying basically we have a studies because, well, we study Japanese university students. Now, vertically, this is important. This is rating, and this is very awkward, but this is average rating of the perceived freedom on average. Each time we ask from 0 to 10, to what degree do you feel freedom in that activity you were just doing when you got dinged on our phone, basically, right? 0 means like completely not free, to like 10 being like absolutely free. So here, work. So that's not exactly the same, okay? How we measure freedom is not exactly the same as how they measure the freedom. I would argue our way is better, but that's me, biased. For work, that was the average, 1.35. So I would say give or take same with the Dr. C study. Study, by the way, sorry, I shouldn't have skipped. Study, it's about 3. I don't know if that's the same, about the same for you. Now, cooking and personal care was approaching 5 as well. So that's actually midpoint. 5 is a midpoint, 50%-ish, right? So sort of consistent. So on the left side of the graph, that's consistent with what the Dr. C, the other study found. Make sense? But then here's what I just had no idea. Leisure. These Japanese students are not having freedom. Even in these activities, they're just over, like sports and games, TV watching, over 5, little over 5. Socializing, even a little lower than 5, midpoint. So this happens in a research actually in science. Sometimes you go collect the data, evidence, right? You go out to the work, do program evaluations and whatnot. Recreation therapists, you have to do evaluation as well. And you go like, you know what? This is not what I expected. Right? No, I'm not talking about this. This was unexpected too. But you go like, well, this is not the evidence that I was expecting for. It doesn't make sense. It's not consistent with the theory. It's not consistent with the other study. It's not consistent with the previous iteration of the therapy or program or whatever. What the heck is going on here? Now you have to actually make a logical guess and based on available information to hypothesize the reason. Okay, maybe this is why we observe a difference, and you move forward. Okay, so let's test that and hopefully make the program and therapy and whatever better. So let's practice that a little bit. Help me out because I still don't really know why. So why did we observe the gap on the right side of the graph? Why did these researchers, observe less freedom in a leisure context compared to Dr. C's study? And here I listed potential clues. They study US American, we study Japanese. Maybe that's something to do with it. They measure freedom from 0 or 1, yes or no, while we measure freedom from 0 to 10 continuum. Their study was about corporate employees. Our study was university students. And finally, their study was 1970s. Ours was 2018. Maybe there are other things as well. If you need other clues, you can ask me the characteristics of my study because I can tell you that much. Now, I want you to find 3 to 4 people. Well, actually, 2 to 3 other people. So 3 to 4, including yourself. Just point the finger. Point the finger. You're it. Group. Small group. Small group. Small group. Small group. Josh. Okay, you can be 5. You can be 5. You can be 5. Jiao, come over here. Okay. Don't. Be careful with your laptop, okay? 3 to 5. 4. You 4? Can you be 4? Okay. So give me at least one logical explanation. Why could that be? This could happen in your life too. You collected data, you did a good practice, evidence-based practice, and you go like, damn it, evidence screwed me up. I have no idea what's happening here. Can you tell me, educated guess, why this might happen? I'll give you 3 minutes. Let's work on this. One logical reason. If you can have a two, even better. Your students, you use your experience too. You can use that too. I love that how you guys like. Okay. I know. What happened to her? Who knows? She's out all day. Okay, okay. All right, she went to Las Vegas, right? Okay. All right. Well, I hope she's having a good time. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh no, LA, right? LA, sorry, LA with the boyfriend, right? Anyway, all right. Back to the question. What do you think? Ah, the 1970s versus now. I mean, 2018. And how so? How that affect our feelings and perception of freedom?
Well, if they had more leisure time, they could maybe have more choice.
So they had more time, just absurd time. Hmm.
Yeah.
That could be it. Or are there? Here's because I think time could be one factor too, and I want to add on to that. During that 45 years or so, have we invented something that could interrupt our daily activity and the sense of freedom and choice? Have we invented anything? Like what kind of? Do you think that affect that? Ah, so you feel the time shortage because we do this. Ah, ah. Or do you feel like sometimes the phone tells you what to do in different ways? Like people try to contact you with the phone and just like. Hmm.
Get a hold of you. Sometimes
True. That is true. Well, that's one good reason. If you can come up with one more, that could be even better, maybe for your exam. I gotta get my exercise in, you know? So what do you think?
Said difference is probably the change decade. TV for one, back in the days, you watch TV for like maybe once a week, where it was like a really big treat to get to watch like that Sunday night show. Maybe you're watching the news where nowadays screen media. Like the lines are become blurred a lot more than they were, I think. And that watching TV.
It was more. It's more blurred right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's more defined than like after work or like after school for kids. It's like go play for lights turn.
Right.
Or adults when they have their days off, they can that 1-2 days off, they can do whatever they want for that day. Whereas now we have a bit more like we're spending like 2 or 3. I think that's more prevalent, and then we have like our weekends. We have the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and then we have 2 full days weekends with that time to work a little more. And then the workers to students is probably the biggest
Change the difference too. So the worker has more clear delineation between work, leisure and not leisure.
Yeah, because they're not studying, they have their job, they have their experience, they work, and they have leisure after everything's met.
Yeah.
Whereas students have 11-hour day, you know, like everything.
You're always student, right? That mindset. Right, right. Other things, not just the studies and academics, right? All right. Good thoughts. Good discussion. You might have gave me a paper idea. I should give you like acknowledgement or authorship on that. Hey, so what do you think? Thank you. And what's your logical reason? What's your hunch? What's your educated hunch around this? Why have we observed the difference? There's some good discussion, and there's a silence. we got the Curtis before, so we'll go to our Kirsten first.
We talked about when you're in school, because we have school, like, I should be studying more. Should I start that other assignment? It just never really feels fully free when you have things to do.
Have you heard that? Kirsten's, what she was saying? Basically, she was talking about the first part. No, the third point, right? The company, corporate worker, employees versus students. So we studied students and you are studied students too. So you have this mentality that you never fully free. Well, that's difficult for me. That you're always thinking, back in your head that should I prepare for a midterm too? Because she gave me to study, guys, or should I just enjoy the last bit of fun time before this exam kick in? Right. I could start working on the next CCR too. Should I? I could. Do I wanna? So it's like always like you're like 60% free, even like free time and so on and so forth. Good point. That's sad. That's difficult, right? We should have like, no, you don't do this during this time. You don't do. You're not allowed to study or work. You cannot wait to be your corporate employee.
Yes.
Like you push that punch card and you, boss, sorry, until tomorrow 9 a.m. I'm not gonna be good. But sometimes it doesn't work that way though. Depending on industry. Anyway, any other thoughts? That's a good logical reasoning, I would say. That's one student about, okay, Dion. Number one, about the cultural difference, national difference. Yes?
You've mentioned before that the Japanese culture is hard workers. It's in their culture. to
Yeah,
Work a lot,
yeah,
or the parents are hard on them to work hard.
true. So that those Japanese students were always like hardworking, work stronger work ethics mindset.
Not as much freedom, not as much leisure.
Yeah, so when they have freedom, just like Kirsten was saying to an extent, like, oh, but a stronger version of it, like, yeah, I should work on the next assignment. I should work on the next assignment that's due like in a month. Yes, I should. Funny story, first time I came to America for my master's degree. So there's a bunch of readings. Like each week we were reading like 200 pages of academic papers, and maybe 300, didn't matter. But I was reading 3 weeks ahead. So when we were actually, I know, you know what? It's a dumb idea, don't do it. Because when I was having like, because I was basically in that particular week, I was to have a discussion about 900 pages before what I just read. So I'm like, just give me like 5 seconds to refresh my mind about that article. Anyway, yeah, so that could be a little bit too. It's funny. It was so funny. American people, US American, characterize themselves, their culture, like, oh, Americans are so like workaholic and whatnot, compared to maybe European culture, maybe a little bit like, you don't know anything about workaholic. Sorry, that's not a good thing. Korean culture.
High school math, and then I come to Canada and I'm like, oh, it's like plus and minus for me, like something like that.
You can study what you're studying right now, right?
In our like schedules, like you leave house, go to school at like come back from like 11 p.m. Like not even come back from just like eating outside.
Right.
Next one.
True.
And then like if you don't do that, you just feel like you're just getting behind of everyone else.
Because everybody else is doing it.
Like if you're not doing something, like it's just gonna be behind it up, and it's not as like simple as stuff.
100%. Cool. I've been there too. This may sound quite foreign to you, but in some part of the world, it is the case. Now, I want to give you one caveat though. A university is an interesting time. So we do this, at least in Japan. I don't know about South Korea, but we do this like a very competitive workaholic mentality. Like some students are actually studying in a junior high, they're studying university entrance material. I know there's some of the top of the Korean people. Anyway, I wasn't. But then you finish the high school and you enter university. That's where people started to actually let it go and let it loose. sort of have a lot of drinks and have fun and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of, I'm not sure. And then that's 4 years before another corporate culture kicks in. And then, yes, back into that grinding game type of things. Sorry. Oh, that's a 50. We got the 2 good reasons. If you have any good reasons you came up with, you want to test it with me, you want my feedback, just because I could ask this in a final exam, you send me email. I will comment on that. Thank you very much. I'll see you Wednesday.